So, welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight. I'm Judith Grober, and this is part 2 with Sevan Boma. And in part 1, we left off with Venus, how that morphed from a very voluptuous woman into a skinny English guy on Netflix. And and I think Sevan is going to pick up right there.
Absolutely, absolutely. First and foremost, thanks, Judith, for being persistent. For those who are tuning into the show, you definitely got the right girl, because she's going to make sure it happens. You know, lots of stuff always going on my end, so we had to reschedule this, but we wanted to come back in and actually finish this off. But that actually gave me time to create some materials, because as I started navigating the space the last time we got on, I realized that we needed some imagery. We needed something to show people, rather than expecting that they've run into all this before and they're all occult geniuses and they have all the books and they're just agreeing. Because after all, why would they even be on the show sometimes? I guess people are here to learn something, and they're here to expand. So that means that we're going to give them something that they knew not. There is, again, the disclaimer of occult knowledge. For me, it's been all my life. And so that's been how long I've been studying this. We all live a real life that is rich with the occult and symbolism. However, we can't say that everybody knows the exact meaning of their lives. So with that being said, it's important to just make it clear that we're going into some knowledge that it may take some to have some background on, to have some education on, first grade, second grade, before getting to this level. However, we encourage you to look at the materials available here on this YouTube channel, and also materials available and provided on the internet, and read more to get more understanding. And generally, we always say something like a keyword, so it's good to have your notes to write those keywords down, so that if you didn't understand what was brought forth, you can go and look up that later. And that's important, because if you hear something that doesn't exactly resonate with you, or you don't feel like you don't feel like that's the truth for you, you would have to go and research it yourself, because let's just face it, we don't know everything. So with that being said, where we left off is we were revealing two master keys within two symbols that, for ease of vernacular and awareness, we'll just say are the pentagram and the hexagram. And we felt that it was important to bring this up, especially in this conversation, because the foundation in which we've come to learn on, if there's something faulty with that foundation, if we think that we found a truth, we have to ask ourselves this question. If I discover a truth on top of a lie, is it really the truth? And I like to be very clear with myself, and I always say for sure no, because whatever that initial lie is, if you don't make it straight and you don't level it, whatever you build on top of that is just going to be as crooked as that lie. And that's pretty much the sum total of a great deal of people's occult knowledge at this point. They have like half truths. And this is why you can hear someone say something that really is amazing, but then, kind of feel like, I guess maybe there's more to that, or, yes and no. And that's a lot of the, even the responses that people have these days. It's like they say really briefly, yes, no. And it's like, which one is it? But this comes from, if a half truth is said, then the person agrees with it at the forefront, but deeply they may not necessarily resonate with what's being said. They need the other piece. So if I say you should be kind and gentle to everyone, but a rapist busts in your house, you could see how that would be a kind of half truth. You would need to know something else of how to deal with the rest of the world from what seems like a very, very heartfelt, very great statement. So that's the only example that I'm going to give of that. And so with these keys, unless you wanted to introduce and launch off with something, I can go right into this, because we do have some stuff to cover, and then there'll be some times for questions. You want to do it that way? Okay, perfect. All right, so let me do this. Let me just shift my screen really briefly here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to some simple screen captures that or some graphics that I put together earlier in order for things to be very clear for us. So let's first remember that this word ma'at, okay, which is the highest level of knowledge that you can reach in Kemet, everyone studying ma'at, means, it comes out in English as math, okay? So it means to be exact. And sure enough, we find that this knowledge that we have on the planetary system with frequency, especially the higher the knowledge gets, it starts to all synchronize into one grand truth. And we'll call that truth Ma'at, and it is just as exact as math. So that is the only real knowledge. Everything else is kind of like we talked about proportions of knowledge. And we need those proportions because we have to go through the process of learning truth. And truth became synonymous with light a long time ago, full spectrum light. And what I mean by full spectrum light is that light has different levels of refraction. That's what makes it green, orange, yellow, all the different colors that we know. Those are the different levels of refraction. So light is the higher element beyond gas. So it was seen that light was more synonymous with life, okay? And so encoding in light and playing around with light, just like we see right now with light workers, this is all being taken from an ancient source that the people who were the mages or the magicians or whatever you want to call them then, they worked with the light or the higher essence and even the spirit, because the light is very close to the spirit, because let's just say that light is vibratory frequency. It's how something is appearing on that vibratory frequency. So when you slow down light, you get different variations, you get different densities of the same substance. But when you speed it up, you also get the light version of that substance. And the best thing about working with that substance is if you work with that one, it trickles down to all the rest, because the light forms and then the shadows. And so that's the sum total of true occultism and true metaphysical study, is to learn how to work with the light. Now, it's interesting because that term has now also been summarized as maybe a hexagram and some guy teaching some Kabbalistic codes and, you know, about all these different weird words. And the truth is that isn't the truth. The truth about the light is, or it may include that, because this light that we're talking about includes everything. But this is really about the womb. And so we're just going to break down a few words here about Venus that will let you know that. Now, Venus, of course, in modern English is known as the light bearer, but you can actually summarize that as the life bearer, because as I told you before, light is life in this tradition, okay? And so also this word Lucifer, which we would think is a modern term, is actually not. Lucifer is the Moorish term, or the Spanish Moorish term, which delivered this language known as Latin. And that's why Latin people still speak Spanish today, because after the Moorish Inquisition, they still kept the language that they were originally speaking under that particular empire, which was the Spanish Moorish Empire. But let's just take a look real quick, and we'll just make sure that we're all following along here and that nothing is invented. We'll go Wikipedia, Lucifer, and I'm going to pull it up here just so you can see it. And what you'll see is, you'll see beyond the TV series, which we talked about last show, is you'll see very briefly, before we get into any details, that Lucifer, and let me blow this up just a little bit bigger so all can see, Lucifer, the light bringer, is a Latin name for the planet Venus, the morning star, in the ancient Roman era. Now, even when you put ancient in front of Roman, that's kind of comical, but the reality is that this is the name that the Romans used for this planet that we've been highlighting as one of the keys to all the mysteries, which is this planet Venus. Now, the reason why we're calling it a key is because when we're born and we start learning things, it's very, very important that we learn certain fundamental things, because those fundamental things actually base how all the rest of our knowledge is formed. That's why kids' chakras develop from the stage between 1 and 7. This pillar chakra is developed, and that's pretty much what they're standing on. So what happens between 1 and 7 can affect a child for the rest of their life. And when things need to be generally fixed with children, you want to look back at what happened between 1 and 7 to find what the issue was initially, like go back to the beginning. So because of that, that foundation is very important when it comes to keys. We know keys as in themselves what give you the ability to have a great foundation. Now, normally your grandmother and your grandfather and your mother and father, if they were still not in an unbroken lineage, carried those keys for you, meaning that when you got to a certain age, they would actually give you certain levels of knowledge, and these were called the rites of passage. And they would also give you other things that generally seemed a little bit weird, like maybe they gave you like a, you know, this, maybe they washed your hands in milk or something wild like that, and then you're like, you just can't connect why that's even important. And of course, if you ask, hey, why are my hands being washed in milk? They would say something like, you don't need to know about this right now. Maybe you'll learn about it later on. And later on in life, through the rites of passage, they would give you that knowledge. So what we have is in history, we have an unbroken chain of knowledge. We actually call that DNA. But from the occult sense, we have also an unbroken chain of knowledge that's revealed to us through nature. And it behooves us to actually go by that than what everyone else is saying, because everyone else, let's say in the churches and also in the political parties and also in the spiritual political parties, because that's really what you're dealing with, they all have a vested interest in themselves and they lie. So when they talk about the father of lies, they're talking about the politicians, the people who are up on the throne acting as if they're your king or kin. But these people will lie to hold that position. So there's a lot that they need to omit about who you really are in order for them to be able to uphold that position as leader over you, a false parent over you. Now, in the ancient times, when your mother or your great-great-great-great-grandmother was still alive and actually inside of the kingdom, if you may, and actually ruling over it, then they would treat you just like they would treat any of their other children. So there was a natural vested interest in your growth and however that needed to come about. However, with this birth of surrogate mothers, surrogate kings, surrogate queens, basically conquerors that have come to the land, done away with the ancient knowledge and languages and come in with their own structure, they cannot tell you about your ancient mother and ancient father or your ancient language or what any of the symbols mean, because that means that you would come into this recollection, you would start to activate. It would trigger things happening actually inside of your DNA, and this would produce a gnosis. Gnosis being, in this case, the ability to know something without being told, right? So you getting certain letters and symbols and hearing certain voices and tongues actually activate that same thing inside of you that resonates. Here's also a little bit deeper of how that works. Now, when you're in school, you may see someone, let's say when you were younger, you may see someone that is actually, that you're in the class with, right? Some child. And 20 years later, I may ask you, hey, do you remember who you were in class with when you were in, preschool? Of course, you'll be like, I don't know. But some may have experienced this before. You may get a dream that actually shows you all of those people still. You may remember yourself in the classroom, see the teacher, and everyone is there. And then when you wake up, you may find it quite odd, like, I forgot all about those people, but somehow I ended up dreaming about them. Okay, so this is because we all have what is to the tune of a photographic memory. And so we're storing all of our interactions and our encounters. And just because we can't remember them, and this is the short-term memory of the brain, just because we can't remember them doesn't mean that they're not actually somewhere. And so too, everything that's ever happened is stored within this mainframe at all times. This planet, as we're calling it, that we're in, everything that's happened is already stored here. But what it takes is that cord to be triggered in order for you to come to the activation of that awareness. So that's what's meant by activation. So as we dig in here, what we find is a part of this activations was being aware of the power of the womb. Now, right away, you can see why this knowledge would just be non-important in a patriarchal society. We are living in a patriarchal society, so I have to go no further with explaining to you why the power that still resides within the woman's womb. Man does have a womb. His mind is his womb, but the female has this womb that was of most interest to occultists in the past. And the reason is because there were some attempts at actually making what you would say is humans or animals in the past by maguses and magicians that were here, and it did not work, meaning that they would get something to the tune of a golem, right? Which later on they try to throw off as being the goyim. But the reality is a golem would be a being that is formed from, let's say, mud or clay, and you try to inhabit it with some spirit of your own essence, and then it kind of gets up and it starts walking around, but it's dumb. It doesn't seem to be aware of anything beyond the composition that you just gave it. So this was sought out by many occult societies for a while about how to actually really create beings externally. Now, if we want to do this, we can only really need to just link up with a woman and have a baby, right? So it's not a big agenda for us to try to figure this out. We just do it. But imagine those who started dissecting the occult and C-secting the occult, they actually had an interest in trying to figure out how to create something beyond dumb golem. Now, needless to say, they never figured it out. They figured out it would be impossible for them. So they just went into the next thing, which was letting you produce real children, real seeds, that their flesh is binded with their spirit. And then they would just take it from you. They would literally use humans as planters of continuous seeds. And then they would just take the seeds early and then train the seeds from there. So they gave up on their pursuit of how to make a smart, intelligent being and bind flesh to memory, or spirit to memory. Spirit is memory. So I just want to be very clear here. The things that a human has amongst many things that is very unique is we have actually a spiritual body, which is the DNA, sometimes called the serpent, sometimes called the energy center, sometimes called Kundalini. We have that fused within our fleshly body, sometimes called the beast, sometimes called 666, sometimes called the Minotaur. We have that fused inside of our body, and they're both together, which is called the divine marriage. And to accomplish that, this has been one of the greatest feats of all time at discovering that in modern times. While in ancient times, you would get this by the time you turn 13. So the light bearer is a reference to also a woman that has her womb full of life. Okay, so you can imagine that when they say Lucifer, the light bearer, they're saying a woman pregnant with child. Now, obviously, you can see then why there's a close connotation between characters such as Jesus Christ beside his gender, and also Mary, which is also carrying the child of Jesus. Okay, so this is always known as Venus being Mary, or the Black Madonna, and her son being Jesus. Okay, so that's Venus. So everyone knows this, but for some reason we get lost when it's time to put two and two together. It seems to be like our whole preference not to finish this mystery, sometimes based on the programming within the society. So we know Lucifer is a reference to the light bearer. Now, in the Arabic, which all these numbers come from, we talked about Al-Manak, which is the recording of everything in the sky. You know about Al-Jabra. You know about Alabama. So there's a lot of the Moorish kingdom that is still embedded within the entire world, because the Moors were the first ones to hold a complete, not conquest, but complete unity within the world, and to create a world constitution where everyone started off on equal footing as a noble, and you either worked yourself up from there by doing great deeds to the family, or you would decrease your nobility and put yourself almost in some level of debt for doing the wrong things. Okay, so let's just be very clear. If you raped someone, you would not only that would not only reflect on your personal nobility, that would reflect on the nobility of your family. And that's why every single person that was engaged in this constitution made a real effort to make sure they did the best they could to raise their children, because your child could get out there and just totally disgrace your family and plunge you into what would then be a color. So you would first start off with the last name of your mother, and your mother's last name would actually be just like those refer to themselves as part of their motherland, like where it was a matriarch, everything was recorded through the mother because that was the portal you came out of. So your family and your nobility was based on your mother's, her name, her spiritual name, okay? Now we see the system completely flipped, but let's look then to this word cipher, which is on the back of Luz. We know Luz means light. And we know cipher is here, and cipher is actually the Arab word, or the Moorish word for womb. It is a reference to this word sifr, which actually means zero. Now, this makes perfect sense, because when somebody asks where everything comes from, because all of the knowledge should be based on math, exactness, math says and has a number called zero. And this is not just a principle or a number, just a symbol that is just thrown out there. It is based on true facts about how the womb brings things in from this void of nothing. And to go beyond the zero, to go through the portal, that really was the most mystical aspects of things. But how things begin, and when we should start counting in the physical plane, should be from the zero, or from the whole, or from the womb. So right away, you can see this knowledge reveals a lot to you. It actually reveals where you come from, so you don't have to run around the planet talking about where did we come from, who's my mother, because when you're just trying to go back to your mother, your first immediate mother, well, what about her mothers? What about her mother's mother? And then even beyond that, why we're still counting women as only being female humans, what about the female whales? What about the female dolphins? Okay, so the divine feminine goes back further than humans. Humans are not, they're a chimera. So the reality is that what we're looking for is we're looking for what is behind the eyes. Okay. So some knowledge about some wisdom about Venus is obviously Venus's true connection to the pentagram. Now, of course, these days, what you see proficiently on everything is this version of the pentagram. And I only need to type it one time and go to images and you'll see it. And this is because this pentagram and all of its variations is actually a plagiarization of the ancient symbols. And true enough, dark witchcraft, which is not telling the truth and is not living the truth, and Satanism, which is not telling the truth and not living the truth, what they've done is they made a certain altercation to this star that doesn't actually that people don't actually become aware of right away because they're missing the details. As they say, the devil's in the details. The reality is that this is a straight line and this is a curve. And it actually means a world of difference. To actually create a straight line version of the pentagram would actually make it masculine. But we know for a fact that this seed bearer is in fact a woman. Okay, so give me just a quick second here. I think there was a push that needed to happen for my video to be clear. So look at this then and just understand why the pentagram is related to Venus, but also why there's somewhat of an issue with trying to determine, well, if this is a life bearer, then why is this all about death? Why are these cults about death and killing and murdering and dark clothes and bad things? And it's because it's a plagiarization to turn it completely upside down, to take a curve and make it into a straight line. So the reason why this pentagram becomes so important, which was important to the Mayans, is actually because of phi and mathematical equations. But more importantly, this is the precession that Venus actually makes around the sun so 13 times around the sun, of course, produces this complete symbol. And this happens every 8 Earth years. So right away, numbers like 5 and 8 and 13 always become consecrated to this process of the womb, light, the zero, etc. All right, so that's as much as I'm going to reveal of this particular key, but well, just in that tense. But let's look at just that transformation so everything can actually stay in this one recording. So we have truth, half-truth, falsehood. But I will read in the I Ching before we go and look for who the culprit is and we want to blame somebody and we want to kill them or slay them out in the streets and all that kind of stuff. You know, let it cool down for a moment and just look at what the I Ching says, which is a way of changes. Now, the I Ching, some call it I Ching, I Ching, some call it different things, but the I Ching is also known as the 64 hexagrams, okay? And this may pass the Western culture really fast because for us, a hexagram looks like, and I think I have one in the background. Yeah, for us, a hexagram looks like this thing over here. Actually, I think I'm over that picture. Here it is. So the hexagram looks like this thing over here, right, to us. But the Chinese, or those in the Orient, seem to insist that a hexagram really looks like, and let's go to this in Wikipedia. Let's see if it went to even source the knowledge. I guess they're not the highest reference of the knowledge on this anymore. Great. So let's just say, right away, we find that in the I Ching, it says that the I Ching uses a type of, let me make sure my screen is, I just have a maxi size screen here, so let me just make sure that's in view. The I Ching uses a type of divination called claromancy, which produces apparently random numbers. 6 numbers between 6 and 9 are turned into a hexagram, okay? So when they say hexagram, and let's find one, it's just taking them forever to show you one. These are hexagrams, okay? So this doesn't look anything like our version of hexagrams, which is here. So this may throw things, which is here. So this may throw things off for many people, okay? So this one. But what this is about is this is about the law of changes, okay? This is about basically yin and yang. If one thing happens, then the other thing is gonna happen. And it's so precise that you can pretty much base everything about what a person's going to do, what's going to happen in a dynasty, what's going to ultimately become of the entire thing off of this structure, unless you move off this structure. So we're going to talk about this today towards the end, that This is one specific system. We need to master this system, but it is not the only system. The Venus and the hexagram are not the only things, but it is something that if you don't have as a key foundation, you never can unlock the first doors. So let that be very clear for those who want to always worship something. Worship yourself. This is all inside of you. So what we're talking about is that it was written that in the 8x8, because the numbers here that are used are 64, okay? That it contains all possible 64 hexagrams, okay? And the reason why I'm highlighting that is because computers work kind of that same way. Not kind of, but exactly. 64 bits, 128 bits, 256, 512. Those are all the movements of a computer, okay? So we need to understand that a computer does not function, and let me just get my screen clear here. A computer does not function just because they've invented it. The computer functions because it is plagiarized from something else that also functions like a computer in many ways, and that's us. That's our behavior, okay? So now that we understand that this hexagram is actually a reference to the way of changes and how things change, and that there was an entire ancient system that was built on just kind of denoting the changes and what happens, we have one in the second chapter that simply says this: as soon as beauty is known by the world as beautiful, it becomes ugly. As soon as virtue is being known as something good, it becomes evil, okay? And this particular two lines, you can cipher almost an entire planet in what has happened to the symbolism by those two lines that are explained to you. This is a cause and effect. But instead of you just taking it as a world thing, take it in your last relationship. It all started great. Hey, you coming to see me? Yeah, I'm coming over. Hey, you gonna bring something? Yeah, I'm gonna cook for you tonight. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. All right. And you get there and everything's all laid out and Kenny G's songbirds playing in the background, right? But that's the first date. So second date, third date, fourth date, marriage, arguments start happening. You start realizing that you don't even like the person possibly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This occurs, right? I Ching. That is the way of change. So again, before we try to find demons doing this to us, because I'll be able to show you proficiently that the demons that are running around are in fact humanoid. Before we want to make a demon doing this, it's important for us to actually see in our own selves our own behavior. Not to mention, if you study occultism deeply, you'll find that this first symbol, as we're denoting as truth, was basically the symbol of the princess. This is what the symbol of the princess looked like and what the beings look like that first arrived here. This is clearly mammalian reptilian, which is the biggest beef in the world. Actually, no, it's not beef. That's mammal. So it's the biggest situation going on is the attitude between the mammalians and the reptilians and how they just are not getting the full picture about what happened with the genetics and how the queen was a mixture of those two genetics and how everybody wanted to be with the queen. And this is exactly how it still works, because remember, this is all going on inside of our body. But Venus is consecrated to the day Friday. Now, we all love Friday because work is over with, and we also love Saturday, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But Venus is designated to Friday because it's like the day we all go out. The beauty, the luxury, the laughing, the youth, all of that is associated with this princess. Abundance, protection, all this is all associated with this princess. So the issue happened very fast, without me getting long-winded about it, that all the kings wanted to be with Venus. Just like if you had someone come into your life that was very abundant, very beautiful, you would just want her to be with you. But what if her whole thing was to be with everybody? And that was just how it was. Now you can get an idea of why they later on began to refer to Venus as the harlot or the whore. And this was just because, like I said, it's behind what is the female's eyes, not the female, that this divine feminine can actually procreate with every being. So even if it was just a king like the dual Yahweh, when he doesn't have his other side anymore and he just wants this Venus or a Shira or a Stark to be his wife, then if she wants to run off in the rest of her procession, this became the big issue in the past. In fact, when you see most wars between kings, it always has to do something with a princess or at least a queen, and the king wanting something that he cannot have. Now, this is synonymously why we dig deep into this metaphysically, why most people actually have problems with their finances. This is male or female in the human race, because we have male and female within our body and a neutral. So what they've done is generally taken their productive side of themselves, which is their breath in, the abundance, and then they've held it. They won't release it, or if they release it real shallow, and then they breathe in again. It's like a rat always pushing the pleasure button rather than choosing to go through the entire process. So in this case, what I'm saying is if you get too much of Venus, if you get too much pleasure, it spoils and it becomes stagnant, just like any energy that we haven't used becomes stagnant within our own bodies and stagnant within our own life. You can probably have like all these TVs still in the garage and all these different things that when it's time to move, literally just vibrate. But when it's time to move, you find yourself kind of too heavy to move around a lot, right? So this is because sometimes we're not letting this energy go. So because it's always going to come back around again. And that's the actual wisdom of the stars and the wisdom of the mages and the scenes, is to know that all of these planets work in procession. There's a time and place for everything. You can jump on the galactic bark or the boat of life, and you can have wind in your sails rather than using a motor or a motivation where everything you're doing has all got some agenda or motive to it. And then you can let the sails blow through, the wind blow through, and it can take you through every single part of this existence as you ride along with the cosmic tribe. And we're going to go and see everything and visit everyone. Now, the visit thing I want to bring up a little bit later because it's interesting. But just remember that you can, what this is saying is that you would have this perpetual energy if you did not try to possess Venus. Okay, so some are in a stage right now where they need to let it go so it'll come back. But just so you know, on the external level, people try to hold Venus. This is synonymous with the same thing that we see in this is synonymous with the same thing that we see within these cultures where the woman is taken. Let me move my picture here. The woman is taken and she is basically put into a situation where there's a black cloth over her head. Okay. So that is to take her. Let me transfer my screen real quick. I got to push on my updates. I just want to move out of the way of the picture completely because I'm about to explain something else about this. There we go. Okay. So now, just let us realize then that we have this transitional phase that happens where the abundance, life, our mother, where things come from, needs to now be re-engineered by some stingy beings that don't want anyone to have Venus, don't want anyone to have prosperity. They want to be the Venus in everybody else's lives. Meaning they literally, if they're male, they take on a feminine trait, right? They put on wigs and dresses and all this stuff. So they're taking on this trait of actually being the funkendator because they want to steal the queen's position, okay? And this is happening on so many levels. It's crazy. And that's why when you unlock this, it unlocks all those levels, kind of like a video game. You get to go to the next stage. So what this is about is this is how it began. This is the truth that many won't accept. As we talked about before, this was the ideal of beauty back in the days. And this is because it was seen as she's abundant. She's going to be able to have a bunch of kids because that's really what it was about. You create more seeds and then you let these seeds, you cultivate them properly. They grow up into being trees. And then once they're grown, they take care of you. They don't reap thorns and thistles for you if you've done it right. And now you really can rest, which is not a reference to death, but a reference to being fulfilled and being happy. So how they depicted that is a very voluptuous woman, because as you see with the breast or the udders, that she had all of the milk to feed this family. You see the horn, which is the cornucopia. It actually stands for many things, which we'll look at here in a minute, but the horn of plenty, right? And this phi, which is a key to all of this, because this is about womb magic. So this is not all a belief in the mind. There's a real mathematical power and a system of how this energy is actually spun up literally, and that has to do with the torus and cones and being able to basically go in and out of wombs, okay? So time travel, wormholes, black holes, all this comes into the womb of truth. So this is why nobody really knows about this kind of stuff, is because they're not studying in the right place. So the next move is, obviously you're not just going to remove any culture from its mother. So it has to be done gradually, and it has to also be done in a way where there's some spite and there's some animosities. Everything starts from spite and animosity. If we start to be jealous, if we start to hate, if we take on any of the opposites of our greater qualities, then we start to actually lose it. We literally become insane. So what the next stage is that the ancient mother is then restylized by, in this case, the Roman Empire, who are bringing forth Catholicism through Constantine, which is the sword. These are not Christians. These are Constantinians, okay? They eventually bought all of the PR on Christianity, but those that were backing Constantine is like the same energy that was backing Alexander the Great. And the whole thing was about just conquering, raping, and pillaging and destroying the divine feminine, to tear the wings off of Venus. Okay, that's what it was symbolic for. Okay, so we see a half-truth birth itself immediately, which is another stylization of Venus. And only to an occultist does one actually become aware that this symbol here is still this symbol here. And the reason is, well, you have to see the whole picture, which I'm not going to grab here today, but red hair is the symbolism of the, and I know it's crazy because you got red hair, but it's symbolism of the reptilian side of the first mother, the reptilian serum side of the first mother. I know, it's crazy how it lines up, right? But this is because the red hair or the serum is a part of the DNA of the ram womb, okay? So only as an occultist would we know that's what red hair stands for, and we would understand how that goes through the Irish tradition, I believe it is, and the Tuatha De Danann, and we would have to connect all of that to figure out what this symbol is really a reference to, because it's lost so much of its connection. Also, the clamshell and coming out of the ocean is equally symbolic, because the clamshell actually makes a heart. And I don't have that image with me now, but the clamshell actually makes a heart. And what the heart is about is the heart. Well, let's just look at it real quick. Why not? Just so it's very clear. We only have 2 keys to deliver today, so we might as well deliver them all the way. Let us look very briefly at the heart, which is the anagram for Earth, and try to figure out why the actual heart symbol does not look anything like, second, let me see here. It doesn't look anything like the actual real heart in the human body, okay? Because the heart is a reference to love, something that we love, okay? Now, we talked about before how everybody loves Venus. They all want to be with her. So let's look then at this symbol, phi. And what we see here, and I have some of this stuff already mapped out and other things. It's a shame I didn't bring it today. I mean, I have an entire chart showing this, but this will suffice so you can know you can find it anywhere. What would happen if you took this right here and just paired it with another one on the other side? Would you not get something that looked like that? Okay, because that's called double phi. That means that you don't have a broken heart. That means that you've actually found your other half. Okay, so this is a reference to that everyone's heart got broken when this queen, who is their mother, was debased into what we're looking at right now. Okay, they were cut off with this straight line, which is a reference to the masculine, but more directly a reference to the occult priesthood, the same people who were ruling in all these different dynasties and actually making sure that this new religion comes forward to everyone, where the central character in the theme is a male. So let's just desist for one moment here to just recap on what we just talked about. What we just talked about was, first of all, that this shell is symbolic to double phi. It's actually would be then the same thing as a cone. But if you go to the ocean, you'll see that too. You'll see that there's some shells that even look like this on the beach that belong in the ocean. And that's because everything comes from the ocean. And this is why Darwin theories and all that is all a part of the hustle. It's all a part of the lying. It's like, oh, I think that everything came from the ocean. But they're all part of the same secret society, which is also the Priory of Zion. And in this secret society, all this knowledge has been completely expunged. And there's awareness that every single thing that is on the land came from the ocean. You can find a replica of everything on land in the ocean, even the horses, the seahorses, all of that. That's all in the ocean first, and still through a process which doesn't take as long as billions and billions of years. It actually takes just a little genetic modification. You can actually bring entities that were once just aquatic onto the surface, or give them the ability to live on the surface. Okay, so that's what all this is a reference to, that Venus is actually still here and resides very deep in the ocean. It's all now shrouded in deep darkness of dark Cthulhu and Lovecraft and the Necronomicon and Aleister Crowley, and they're all liars. They're all thieves, okay? So the reality is still in the ocean is an ancient energy in the amniotic fluid deep down, where they like to call the black goo. Deep down there, there's a living and moving force that is actually a part of the motherly aspects of our planet. Now, also, the moon is like the parent of Venus, if you study. So every time we divide a planet, we create a new day. So the reason why we have 6 days or 7 days a week is because we divide one personality or one trait from another. The planet grows up, has a baby, and now here comes a new baby. So Venus's mother then is the moon. So you can see why the mother, the milk, Molech, the mothering aspect of things, the moon will look at Venus. I used to be like that one day. She's hot. The reality is that this is the connection between the planetary systems that we live every day. However, all our planetary systems have been masculinized. Okay, so now we still have Monday. Nobody knows still, that is connected to the moon. Moon's connected to water. Water's connected to the amniotic fluid. It's connected to a lot of other things about life, etc. And then Tuesday, we start immediately going into, now we're at Mars and now we're at Mercury. So we have this preference of all of our planets in the days of the week actually being now males, when they're really actually androgynous. We don't need to talk about that right now. The only thing that we need to realize here is that this symbol, when also becoming thin, this term that we're calling psychological was really all just about what symbols can do to you and what symbols do to people. And so if you put a symbol of Venus and you take her down a few dress sizes, what happens with everybody's pockets is everybody's pockets go down a few sizes too, as far as how much abundance they have. And so this is a way in which subliminal programming has been taking place for thousands of years, because it wasn't psychology that discovered if you put symbols around people and then you change that symbol over time, you also change that person internally. That's called magic, okay? That's just a term that's rolled under these days. So we find that she loses some dress sizes, everybody else does too, meaning that everybody's abundance goes under pretty much. The feudal lords, feudal kings, all the dominion, people losing their land, wars, all this begins to happen as this star becomes demonized, right? And I say in every tense demonized because we find, if we don't want to go through all of the processions of what this Western world had done to Venus and what they do to women, and still to this very moment, we can see that he eventually ends up as a guy. That through a process, it becomes first a genderless angel, which is how you read about it first in the Old Testament, that is perfect and that has, favor with all of the gods and is the leader of all the angels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to then being cast down. Lucifer, I've cast you down, blah, 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 blah. And now you are Satan, which is actually another being. And that's even another interesting part of all this, that Lucifer even gets associated or made into being Satan, and Satan is an entirely different being with an entirely different story. But what is connected between Venus and Saturn, or Lucifer and Satan, is that they are lovers. That 5 and 6 go together in most of geometry. 5 and 6 are the creating principles of this world. It's called the ball game. And that's why on the soccer ball, you see a hexagram and a pentagram, because this is what it takes to create not only a torsion field, but a fully intelligent torsion field. So this would be like a tornado consciously guiding itself. You can have a tornado, which is what the hexagram really is. You can have the energy source. It's like a steam engine. But do you have that intelligence? Do you have the memories? Do you have all the DNA and the data of 5? You see what I mean? So that's why these coming together, the 5 and the 6, is like what Friday and Saturday is like for you. These are the funnest days. Even still, it's still hard for them to demonize completely these days, although they have meaning in your mind, but they have done it in the symbolism. And the reason why I have to point this out is because now when we get to the conclusion of today, and when we start realizing why our abundance is locked up, we'll be able to actually accredit that to that we have the wrong idea of actually who our parents are. And if we have the wrong idea of who our parents really are, what this would actually create is that wherever things began for us, we would be experiencing the problem right now. And this is why if you ever ask a question like, how did the leopard get his spots, to like an old person or an ancient person, the story is going to go something like, something happened one time to the leopard in the beginning. And ever since then, it had these spots. Okay. And it may seem so immature and so not correct to you. However, the deep knowledge is basically saying that if something happens to you in the beginning or at the original part of your origin, you're going to forever bear that mark of what occurred. So in order to correct that, you're going to have to go back to where it started. And if you have in your mind the actual path to the womb, because you know that you started in a womb and your mother is X, okay? So you actually are able to actually go right to that womb in your consciousness. Well, you're actually able to change everything about what you may find as your flaw now. However, if you're completely afraid of your mother, you think your mother is a deep, dark demon with horns, okay? Now, even horns take on this connotation of being evil, okay? And I'm gonna show you about that in a minute. But so this deep, dark, horn-winged, dark creature that is basically got blood hanging from its mouth, that's a vampire, is your mother, okay? That's what the subconscious mind is saying, because this has been subconsciously embedded in most people's mind, that Venus and Satan are the darkest, evilest creatures. Okay. And this is how it begins to roll. So now let us take the second key, because, we do have about 30 more minutes in our conversation today. And again, trying to get every single thing about the high levels of arcana into one episode is pretty tough, but I think I'm doing a good job of it. But we want to reveal the second key. For those who have ears, they will hear and they will know from what is being revealed exactly what to do. Because this is just having everything all in one place, and also answering some of your speculations about things that you've been kind of thinking about or seeing in different places anyway. So this is going to make it conclusive. Okay. So what's interesting is that this term Yad-He-Vah-He, known as the name of God, is rather interesting. It's been very enigmatic in my life, I would say the least. It's the name that doesn't come back void. And what that means is that somehow there's some huge secret surrounding this particular symbol or these particular words in Hebrew. And most have not been able to crack this secret, or have cracked parts of it and then just completely ignored what the rest of it actually reveals. Okay. And now if you look on the top of any like old church or Gothic cathedral or any of the paintings that depict God, once you go all the way to the top, look at all the pictures and you'll see this on the top right here, Yad-He-Vah-He. Okay. So as if to emphasize that this is God's name. Okay. And of course, if you go into the tradition, you'll find out they say, yeah, in fact, that is God's name. It's never supposed to be uttered. It's high and holy. It's actually terrible. And then they just go into the continuous demonization of what this word really is. So now I'm going to reveal to you not only what it is when it's without its mate, but what it is when it's with its mate. Okay, and I'll explain that. So this word in Hebrew actually summarizes to the number 26. And this is because in the Hebrew language, all letters are numbers. So that helps with Ma'at, because that means if somebody is lying, this means the sum total of their entire conversation will be a number that is not true. So this means that the coding system is so developed within the culture that, and this is obviously the ancient system. That's why in the movie The Mummy, if you go back and look at the movie The First Mummy, they actually go and they unearth this mummy, right, in Kemet. And there's one guy that was on the tour guide team of the people who were doing the unearthing. And when they unearth this mummy, of course, they want to make everybody demons. They want to make your mother a demon. So the mummy comes, and it's going to kill everything, right? And everybody's running. It kills like a lot of stuff because this is what they want to give you an idea of. So you can never tap back into the truth or your abundance. But at one point, the mummy goes up to this one guy that's their luggage carrier or whatever, and the guy starts speaking to him in Hebrew, and he stops before he's about to kill him. And he says, he speaks the language of the slaves. Bring him with us. Okay, so that's as much as they're going to give you about what Hebrew really is, okay, and what original Hebrew really is. So I was one of the first people, I can say, that actually cracked that the Hebrew language, when you drop it down on itself, that it does this. In fact, you see how with the Hebrew language, every single part of the language, oh, excuse me, shift onto my screen here. Okay, let's go back for 1 second. So what I'm telling you is that the Hebrew language is a map of the vectors of what we're calling the Hebrew language, okay? So the entire Hebrew language is just this hexagram in pieces. Now, I later on found out that all languages are built that way. Languages start as symbols and then they're broken apart into your mind by them creating letters for you. And then when you're using those letters, you're evoking the cube, okay? And that's how letters become power. Because every time you start uttering it, it's like a code. You're moving certain positions on the cube, like a Rubik's Cube. And when you unlock something, then it comes to life. It comes forth from the center. Now, this is all so hyper weaved into our reality. Our bodies is actually one of these. And when like voices coming from us now, it's coming from our center. When we say things, it bursts from our mouths, but we're only half magic. I remember a book when I was a little kid, and it was called Half Magic. And now that I got older, I realized that it was trying to explain the truth inside the book. And the kids inside the book, every time they wanted to wish for something, they had to wish for it twice to get the complete one. But the first part of the book just becomes about their mistakes of using these wishes and never realizing at first that they need to wish for things twice because they keep getting half of it. And this is why. In English, we have 26 letters. So we find the arrival of this number 26 again, right? And those that are Kabbalists, true Kabbalists, meaning oral resuscitation, meaning someone has either told you from their mind to your ears because it's never been written down, or through gnosis, you've actually pulled it from your DNA, you'll become aware that the number 26 never rides alone. It always is in doubles because of the math around it, because 26 times 2 is 52, and this is known to create one Anu, which is our word for a year. Okay, so the god Anu is where we also get our word annual from. Okay, annual is Anu, meaning 1 year. So an Anu is 52, not 26, okay? And because of that, any Kabbalist knows that when we say 26, we're saying what is visible. So sure enough, the English language and the Tetragrammaton is visible, but there is an invisible half. And this is why we have a dark side in our world right now, okay? Something that has not come to light. Because this symbol that you're seeing as a pyramid is actually the same thing I showed you that has been done with the pentagram. Remember we talked about how the pentagram has been made into straight lines? So if you took a D for what it really, actual delta for what it really is, that's why delta starts with D, is it's a D. So this is why every time you only use the half of 26, everything's devilish, demonic, divided, dark, distorted, really, really disturbing, demented, dangerously diabolical. All those words begin with D's. And this is what you start learning about the D. I see some people talking about etymology online right now, and it makes me snicker a little bit. They even question if I know etymology, even though the code to the matrix went to introduce not just the old etymology of each word, but the personality or the archetype of the symbol. So like S, when S is hanging around, because S is a snake, when you put the S on the back of the word, it pluralizes the word, because snakes, they pluralize things. They are about energy. But when you put them on the front of the word, they actually reduce the word. They actually take the life away from the word, as in mothering, and then you put an S on the front, it becomes smothering, okay? And that's the power of the S, to give or to take away. So I already went through this with humanity about explaining that words are symbols and letters are symbols. And when you want to interpret a word completely, you have to take apart each letter and actually understand the energy behind that letter and then what's being said. So now that we know 26 is really D, it's a half of a wheel. Okay? Because if we put two D's together, we get a whole wheel. But if we only have one D, it is a half of a wheel. Now, you ever seen a half of a wheel try to roll? Goes nowhere. And thus, we have not gone anywhere, because what they decided to do was to tell everyone publicly that the Tetragrammaton, or Mr. 26, was good enough by himself. And now he's pretty pissed off. He's kind of flaming hot at this point because he has no water. He has no other side. He has no divine feminine aspect. He's only a male. Okay, and this is what later on became known as the pagans, or beside the Megans, Ma versus Pa. This created all the duality. It created all the wars. And this is because they split the language. So when they say, let us go down and confuse them, this is why many people say that English is an ancient language. Oh, it is. It's hieratic and demotic. And half of it, the Desmodema, is missing. So the truth here in this is that when they say, let us go down and confuse them, this is basically the colonizers saying that this is one language is in the entire world. We need to disturb this language. And that disturbance of the language was to remove half of it and to bring in the dark dimension. Okay, darkness, ignorance, not being aware of what's really going on. Referring to yourself as a color. I'm a white person. I'm a black person. I'm a yellow person. Even though you can't even get yellow people to do that. You see what I mean? You can get brown people to do it now. It's an overall agenda to make everyone refer to themselves as a color, because to refer to yourself as a color is to put yourself into the caste system. And to put yourself into the caste system actually means that you're in debt. You're not a noble. And so thus you can't even be treated on the same level as what we say is human being, which are all created equal. You cannot be a part of the cosmic constitution referring to yourself as a color, because we're actually all the same family. And the color grades were used to, when someone in the family went in debt, for us to determine not only what chakra we needed to work with them on. Like if they went green, we knew what chakra we needed to work with them on. And then from there, they would work themselves back up through the colors until they poked themselves back out the womb again, and then they would see light. And so we all had a vested interest that if someone went into debt, we would try to fix their DNA, actually, because the entire human family's DNA would be affected. It would be a memory. It would be a part of our memory bank that we would keep having to access. Okay? So right now, we've just cracked that the Tetragrammaton, which is the hidden word. Now in Freemasonry, the hidden word is supposed to be lost. Okay? Now, the hidden word is also the hidden world. Remember when I talked about the heartbreak, right? So the heartbreak is that there's another half to us, which is on the spiritual plane, and we're not even aware of it. And we're sad because we don't generally have access to connecting with that. So our heart is broken, okay? And this comes from this kind of work being done through the spelling. And that's why we call it spells, okay? Not just the surface. It's called a spelling. You know, people are just reciting, vainly reciting. To be original, you just go back to the source, and the source will tell you all of this and more. So what we've now cracked is the reason why they killed Hiram Abif. Hiram Abif is a reference to Murugan. Hiram Abif is a reference to even Saluman. Hiram Abif is a reference to the real father, who is like a lion, okay? A lion face, Leo Fentalis. meaning that the Sphinx is a black lion queen, which is a serpent queen, black serpent. It's a lion serpent, okay? The most powerful symbols. So Venus is a lion serpent queen, just like you'll see her in the Kemetan tradition. And her father is a lion serpent king. Now, later on, this lion serpent king becomes Yaldabaoth, the Demerge, the evil one, the dark one. But now we're seeing a trend here. Everybody gets the dark shade if they have anything to do with our origins and have anything to do with our parents. So Hiram Abiff, which is, of course, well, first, let me just go back very briefly, because we're not going to miss anything here. And we're even going to get this done in 20 minutes, which is amazing. But I just, let me explain to you what's happening here. And I didn't think this was going to come out today, but I'm glad. So this is what's happening, okay? The Masonic tradition, let me pull one more thing. Let me let you just look at that for a minute. And then let me just pull one more thing. So there's no refuting about this. A lot of cats are going to go under the bus right now. So I love to throw darkness and evil and despair under the bus. One second. Because this is how worlds get destroyed. So somebody would have to come in here and just call bullshit and really tighten things up. For those who are listening, I'm not saying that this is going to benefit everybody that is in the world. I had those ideas before. Those who want truth, it will be miraculous, like a miracle for the changes that it will make for them. But those who want to still live in the falsehood, which is basically being dark and evil, basically being a person who wants to hold a grudge, like a person who wants to hate someone else, okay? See, all I want to do is I just want to find the truth. I want to know what happened to my family. I want to know what happened to my tribe, okay? So let me show you what happened. Now, we were already told that Freemasonry was infiltrated right around the time that Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati and all that whole thing popped off, also in Germany, where also all the German secret societies were infiltrated. And basically all the secret societies around the world were infiltrated by even people who pretended to be a part of that society, but they really had another agenda. And so let me explain how such things will happen very briefly. Now, the entire world was known as the realm, okay, by the original Freemasons, or the Masons, or the builders, which were the Eastern Stars, which is a reference to Venus, and then also the males, who are the builders, all taking their orders from Solomon or Hiram Abiff of how to build the temple internally. So this is nothing about external temples, okay? The external temples came later, but what was always put on the front door of any external temple was know yourself. Because if you didn't know yourself, you definitely weren't going to learn it when you walked into the temple, because that was all external. You needed to come inside first, realize it through there, and then you can go forward with this ancient knowledge and wisdom of self, okay? So what Freemasonry originally was, or a builder really was, is a person purporting the knowledge about how to build up your chakra centers and how to build your temple so you can scale the ladder of lights. And that was set out into like a role-playing game that actually was a bit fun, and many cultures were attracted to it. So as you read in Shriners, these are Shriners, okay? So these are the Noble Order, the Mystic Shrine, okay? This is another organization that ran hand in hand with Freemasonry that actually ended up taking over the Noble Order, okay? Now, the Noble Order of the Shrine, or the Shriners, the shrine is the Kaaba, okay? Just so you can understand why there's all this beef right now and what happened with bin Laden and all that. And it's because they were all friends. But the reputation continued to deteriorate because of traitors and people not honoring their word, and no honor amongst thieves, as they call it. So this already happened hundreds of years ago, but it's been in a degrading state since the original knowledge, which was the great word, the great secret, which I just told you about, the language, was destroyed. And that was symbolic to them killing Hiram Abiff. The first act of the Freemasonic initiation today is they basically kill you. And they put you into a mock killing of Hiram Abiff. And then from that stage, just like they killed him for the truth, you are dead in their system and you don't know the truth. So because they don't know the truth. And let me just make that very clear. As they say in their own text, they were looking for a code. They were trying to get a code from Hiram Abiff. There was two thieves. The same two thieves that you see on the side of Jesus is just another rendition of the same story. Two thieves that were trying to get the code from Hiram. They had tucked themselves in close, meaning that they actually even became nobles themselves, but they were acting like we couldn't see them, or that you can't see deception in someone. And this is just like with a healer. Just because you see a virus in someone doesn't mean that you don't start healing them. For a teacher, just because you see ignorance in someone doesn't mean that you don't start teaching them. That's the reason why you even exist. So too, the Hiram and all of those beings who were still on exalted levels saw that they were gonna try to be betrayed. And in that mock betrayal, because it wasn't real, they tried to get the secret name, the ancient knowledge, what binds flesh to spirit and all that from Hiram Abiff at that time, and they couldn't get it, and they killed him. And thus, he died, the tradition died, that sacred name was lost, and that is the state that they live in today. They cannot go back to their father and their mother because they feel like they betrayed them, and it is unpardonable. And that is the state of a Zionist. He feels that he has committed a deed that is even affecting his G5 haplogroup DNA, which it is. It's passing down generations, and it won't stop. And the only person that can actually stop it is the children in this world today, even his children coming together with the family of the world. So this is deep stuff is what I'm saying. You don't just tamper with holy things and not get hit with a curse or a course, a lesson. Like, why not to do that again? I'm sure he won't do it next time. Sure he won't kill father. But now notice how this still plays out. There's so much guilt. Even when you see movies like Star Wars, Luke, who's now a male, kind of thin too, Luke is Lucifer, and obviously Satan or Saturn or Solomon or Murugan is his father, the Dark One. And this is how they can embed in everybody's mind this conflict that doesn't exist except for in this fake word or world that they've built inside of our consciousness, that Hollywood projection that is inside of people's consciousness, okay? So in this now, I'm gonna show you what happened. So they were bought in, just as he says. He says that, meaning this is the account of the man who first started this. And he says that, let me read it to you. In 1870, there were several thousand Freemasons in Manhattan. Okay, one second. I want to just go to origins here. I'm not going to history because those are the fake Masons. I think it's going to be down here. They're not going to tell you that part first. Where did this all start? This all starts, fraternity fund fellow. Okay, so Shriners House of Children, the organization on Shriners. Okay, maybe I'm actually at the wrong entry here. So I'm just going to explain to you what's in the other entry before they Mandela affect it. But basically, that the Noble Mystic Order of the Shrines began when one gentleman, and it may still be here and I'm just not finding it, but one gentleman from this order, which is supposed to be William Florence, was invited overseas by the Arabs to a wedding. But see, weddings overseas are not, especially in these times even, this was not too long ago, in the 1850s or whatever, those weddings bring you completely into initiations themselves. Like everything about the woman being bequeathed to the man, you got to read Czars and Alien Rituals and the Sudanese Czar cult and all that, because they don't play around when it's time to bind one person to another person, because this could be disastrous for the DNA, disastrous for the family. So in him watching this whole performance that the king or this noble was actually performing for his daughter's marriage, he started writing everything down. And he became so fascinated with this, he worked to get himself invited, according to his story, to get himself invited to at least 2 more of these weddings. And by the end of that, he had the entire ritual down, and he had all the regalia, the clothing, he had drawn all the stuff. This is what it says, and you'll find it. He had drawn all the stuff, and then he came back to the United States and started his own. And somehow this rapidly begins to grow. And so, of course, there's lots of pieces missing here. The biggest piece is that they were enlisted from secret societies, just like we have Russiagate and all this stuff happening right now, to come into the United States and continuously bring this disorder by deconstructing most secret societies. And I just want to explain, and I was going to do this earlier, how you get secret societies. You get secret societies because during even the Spanish Inquisitions, during the Constantine's rule, during Alexander the Great, they always had one tradition that they needed to ram down everybody's throat, and that generally was Catholicism, okay? So people got used to actually going outside, and if they ask you, you know, Hail Mary, shit, y'all killing everybody. But behind closed doors, practicing something else, okay? It was all the time this was happening. This is what bought crypto Jews. This is what bought a lot of secret societies, because generally once these surrogate kingdoms started coming in that had these foreign traditions and these foreign religions, the people, if they didn't want to do that, they were killed right away. So you had to say, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, but behind closed doors, you still practice your tradition. This is still to this very day. These Zionists are trying to kid you and telling you that they worship Venus and Lucifer under the guise in which they show you in horror movies. This accomplished several things. Not only do they go back home and practice Judaism, which is the study of the stars and profiting based on how the stars move. This is like a farmer. If you plant seeds during the wrong time, you ain't gonna profit. But if you plant those seeds the right time, which the sky will tell you, there's even times that you can plant a seed and it'll grow twice as much as it would during normal times. And that's why the word profited and prophecy are together. So they still practice prophecy and profiting under Judaism, but in the open, they're the Illuminati. And what they've done is they've gotten a few really dense servants that they've trained since children to even make everyone believe that they're actually all practicing this tradition, and they show it in Hollywood. Now, many of them now do, and they're lost. Have you ever seen anyone get what they expected to get out of these dark, horroristic versions of what Satanism and Venusian magic or Luciferianism is really about, according to them? Their idealism is that much of a child who's probably gone through a great deal of abuse and a psychological trauma, because it goes something like, they want to have some dark, evil creature with them that nobody else can see. That when someone doesn't do what they tell them to do, it not only eradicates them, but it also brings girls and slaves to them that do anything that they want it to do, right? So 99% of the people who actually become Satanists under this modern term and Luciferians under this modern term, they never get that. What they actually become is so depressed and so emoed out in black and weak, generally always weak, because now an interloper, anytime you keep your mind in dark demonic things, you'll resonate with anything that has that kind of resonance. So they do get in touch with something, but it definitely ain't Venus and it definitely ain't Sat, okay? So also, as a chagrin, the Illuminati is the one who started that. They don't practice that shit. They would love to make you think they do because they want you to fear them. Because now that you think that that's that, and now you're like, damn, you may read the book. Like, you may get broke one day and be like, man, I would join the Illuminati. Shit, what they say the book was, pick a trick, whatever. And then they go start reading this book and like, bat's blood. And then normally, because they don't do anything completely either, they just wear the black rag and wear the black clothes. They don't really do that shit. Some of them do. Like I said, they got some crash dummies and they get more of that darkness on their consciousness, acting like they're ever going to be rich. You can't be rich with you killed a cat on your consciousness, or you just murked one of your best friends. You can't get rich like that. That's not even common sense. So they lack even common sense. So also we have to stop lacking common sense. If we believe, and these stories are ancient, the Venus story, Inanna, Ishtar, all that stuff is ancient stuff. Osiris, Asar, Aset, all that stuff is ancient stuff. So if we believe that the entire world began on the Necromocon's version of them, which, oh, the dark, demonic, evil creatures, how does shit even begin like that, homie? Nothing, common sense, nothing begins with the end. You can't create life with destruction. So common sense tells you it's a lie. Plus, look at a flower. It bears this concave pentagram inside of all that beauty. Look at the bee's hive. Look at the papaya seed. Look at all the things that also have a pentagram and the hexagram inside of them. The only thing that you'll mainly notice is they're not straight lines. And that's the whole key to everything. And that's what they did. They plagiarized and stole the ancient knowledge, turned it upside down, and made it so close to the truth that you can't actually tell which one is the truth unless you're initiated. And the ones that are initiated into their societies, of course, they can tell which one is the truth. But man, on the other side of things, as far as the people who were getting together, tribe, to connect the world and to unlock our powers, well, it's slim pickings at this point. And it's because most people are locked. It's a triple bind. It's a triple bind, a Gordian knot. Okay? If you can imagine anything that you find in society that's ancient, they'll try to find it and make a weapon out of it. Let's weaponize it. Weaponize a Gordian knot. What do you mean? How do I do that? Well, create something that will not allow them to get loose. Okay, here it is. I got one. I got one, boss. Another dark, demonic minion mafia creature. I got one, boss. What do you got? Well, listen to this. Why don't we take their parents, since the whole thing in their mind is about their parents, their ancestors. And they know their ancestors are powerful. So the first thing we need to do is remove them. So when we get to the land, the first ones we're going to do, we're going to take all of their fetishes, all their temples, and we're going to destroy as much of that stuff as we can. And I know we can't destroy the pyramids because I tried. So we got to make another story about that. But anyway, let's tear all this stuff down and bury it, which is what they do to seeds. See, these people are so dumb, they don't even get what they're doing. They're just burying the seeds of the ancestors. So now we get buried deep. We're in the darkness. So then we get sold this half-truth. It's beat into us, basically, about how they're the rulers of everything, the kings to everything, our real parents, the whole nine. And we get a new language. So that way there's no tones and vibrations that actually really resonate completely with us, even though we hear our tones and vibrations in many of the words that we use, like the ove in love. Okay, and many of the other words, you'll notice the ism and jism and schisms and all of that. Those words are still part of the ancient language, but so fragmented, we can't put the whole story together. Step one. Step two is to then reintroduce those parents as being just something you should be afraid out of. That's how it starts first. And that's why over every single sacred land that there's still people that propagate around, there's generally a church or a mosque. Because those places at this point, especially the children, are boring as fuck, excuse my language, and they also don't mimic the truth. And more than likely, there's some type of abuse taking place in there that makes a child naturally feel like that place is dark. But this used to be the same place, but underneath it, that would be where everyone would actually come and connect. So, bam, step two. Step three is then to reintroduce the symbolism of the ancient mother or the person's mother as the antithesis to this new system that has been brought about. So meaning that this Constantinian rule, now called Christianity, now introduces, because they can't make two devils. That's why they had to consolidate Satan with Lucifer, okay? Just to show you how grotesque they are with their technique. So they decided to take this entire tradition and to make the two most enigmatic characters in history, the fundating components to this generation, the ones that everybody hates. So what Christians really are at this point is proxies, antenna-like dinonucleic proxies for hating our mother. And that's the truth, because every time in their subconscious, when they think of Lucifer and they think of Satan, they have no clue of who they're talking about and dealing with. However, they profane. And this is why the Bible warned about this. It's called blasphemy. It's the unpardonable sin. Not meaning that you'll never get into heaven, meaning every time you do it, you can never get to another level. You just can't. It's not a part of it. For you to stand on the truth, you must know the truth and accept the truth. And that's why it becomes so hard for Luke in Star Wars to accept Darth Vader as his father, because that's symbolic for them now. Now they've taken it into their own context. So now we got 2 more minutes here, but I'm going to finish off by explaining what this actually is and what happened in the secret societies. And then I'm going to close down by showing the power behind this particular symbol. So what we find is that they took over the Moorish Empire. America was Morocco, okay? The Moroccans from the Spanish coast to All of that was the Moroccan Empire, as I said before, operating under the Constitution where all is created equal. And there's a lot of mysticism in this empire because there is the enchanted realms, also the North Gate. The North Gate is what we're calling North America. That's known as the North Gate, the enchanted realm. And this is because even to this day, if you come up in Costa Rica, man, you'll see some stuff that you've never seen before and that people have never seen before. They think this is like a paradise, but it's also stuff that can poison you around here. So they called that the enchanted realms, okay? And there were people also living in the enchanted realms, like what they call today the Picts. Oh, those are Picts, the Pixies, the small people. No, those are the indigenous people of those realms. And these realms stretched as far as you can think of across the kingdom. Remember, Russia was the highest producer of pineapples during the Dutch Indian Trade Company in their own records. So this means that mud flood and straight up, you know, what you would say is climate change now can really affect an entire area where they would be growing coconuts and mangoes one day, and then in a little bit later now have to figure out how to get a thick fur pelt. And that's all based on how you treat the woman in your country. That's the whole thing about it. It always comes back. And that's why as a master of metaphysics, you can answer really any questions. But yes, if you hinder the divine feminine in your area, it becomes bar, which means dry. Bar is the original name of Saturn. Saturn is an enforcer, by the way. The Moorish Empire operated under the sword of Saturn because they were the enforcers of the cosmic laws. So if you saw an enforcer coming, you knew somebody was going to be being taken away because they had done something in the kingdom. They can even get you in your sleep. And you would now need to pay with the sentence of time. That's why Saturn became the god of time in order for you to balance yourself out. And that was wisdom. So all of that became, well, if we see Saturn coming, he's the boogeyman. Oh, shit, we did something wrong. And of course, this would be a big issue for people who keep doing stuff wrong. And also there would be fear, which is respect in this stage of things for people who saw that coming and knew that Saturn is more like a mailman. He's more like a marshal, okay? Because he can serve you. But what you don't have Saturn hanging around if you've done nothing. Or he's guarding your gates if you've done nothing. But if you've done something, then he's coming to get you. And this is why it became, oh, Saturn's the boogeyman, because they have a problem with the boogeyman. So in conclusion, if you read through this, you'll see how they pretty much made a mess out of the ancient secrets, 1001 Arabian Nights, Aladdin, the genies, the jinn, the sharifs, the stars, you know, the regalia, you know, the different levels of magic, the flying carpets, all of that completely just washed away. So no power. And this is what I'm saying to humanity with this happening, because a lot of people want to accept it and be a part of it. You will never have power. Your family will never have power. Our DNA will be disempowered, but those who actually listen to the truth and hear the truth will get it and understand it. This document explains to you right away that all of these places which you find in the US and across the globe were all Moroccan places before they were taken over by, I guess you can call them the colonizers. This is the latest term that they want to run under. So you see, there's Al Pontiac, there's, you got Alabama on here, you got Indiana, you got Kentucky, Maryland. All these words are Moorish words. They're all coming from an ancient empire that had been usurped and taken over by imposters who were playing games with this. And that's what I'm saying. That's why everything is based on EA games and video games, because they're making us think that life is really a game and your DNA is at stake. They're wearing this stuff and they don't believe in this stuff. They laugh about this stuff. And that's what this is in this symbol. They changed the symbol. The sword was originally on the bottom, because when you put a sword on top of something, it means that you're attacking it. And this is why to this day, this sword is on the top. And this used to not even be a man. It was a female sphinx, meaning this emblem that you see in here that looks like Barack Obama at this point, who's basically their version of Akhenaten. It was a female. That's the mystery of the sphinx, is that she's a black female. And if you know that, then subconsciously you can, black reptilian Naga, melanated. So if you want to make, oh, you talking about like a sister? I'm a little bit deeper. I'm talking about Dravidian, okay? And this is, again, the final connection, and then I got to jump off this. Dravidian, now, you know, they call it the King of David, the Star of David, okay? Where this is coming from is because the Dravidians, who is Murugan, these are Dravidians, okay? And the thing about Dravidians is we can connect what we would say to this day, white people and black people into the same body, okay? Because she has what is known as 6 ether hair. This means very thin hair, and the 9 ether skin, which is the dark skin. And that's 2 races inside of her. You see what I mean? So this is where wisdom comes in. This is how wisdom eliminates silly divisions that occur based on geological changes. You put me for 3 generations over in the Ural Mountains and watch how I look. You'd be like, 7, is that you? You're like, yeah, man, I had to adapt. There was too many layers of skin. So the reality here is that everything can be solved within wisdom, but nothing can be solved in lies. I have one more image that I want to show, which is ultimately what the tetragram is. The tetragrammaton, once it is put back with its pair, and let me see, my last diagram is also here. Yes. So its pair, as you see here, when the D connects with the other D, or when this triangle connects with the other triangle, it creates the vehicle. Okay, the vehicle is also known as the Merkaba, you know, or Metatron's cube. All lies. The Shalom and all that, they ain't coming in peace, they're coming in war. Because peace, actually, they are coming in peace. Peace means a part of something, not the whole thing. So this is, they speak with a forked tongue. That's what that's called in occultism, speaking with a forked tongue. It means that you're telling the truth, but you're also telling a lie. So when they say shalom and peace, they mean peace, meaning with a sword, to cut something from another thing, because they took the language, cut the language in half, then they remove the divine feminine aspect of it, which makes it warlike and hot. That's why God is always hot. He just needs a chick. He just needs to sit down somewhere and get rubbed down with a massage or something. But it's going to continue for them because they're continuously spinning into the level of the divergent. They're spinning down the opposite side of the vortex. And in conclusion, what the tetragram really is when it's connected is very similar to what you're seeing here. It becomes a torus field. This is the Om. It's known as the Om. It is the name that does not come back void. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was man, and the Word was with God, and the Word was man, and the Word was God. God is man. Okay, so what this just means is this is a yantra. Go back to the ancient knowledge of the original. This is a machine, as they called it in the ancient language, what that would interpret to us. The body is like a machine or a contraption that can actually hold a flesh and a spirit into place, right? This is all sacred stuff. And on top of that, it's so powerful, it never comes back void, meaning if you can get one to work, it never fails to actually come to life, because that's a reference to many gods trying to create things in the past that just ended up dead. This is the fractalation of phi in itself, as we see a continuous sequence of the Fibonacci, because the tetragram is also in mating with the pentagram. It's 6 and 5 are coming forth from this same symbol to produce life. This is the horn of plenty, meaning to be able to create seeds and generate seeds through time. This is also the symbol of time. And so I trust that we'll be able to get in here in another occasion and actually be able to, you know, go into a part 3 of this. Let me blow up my screen real quick. But it was amazing, you know, just to set this timeline and to actually be able to get that much of it in. And there's obviously a lot of stuff that got left out. You know, you have to research, well, because I introduced a lot. The Venus and Saturn stuff is replete. Like, you just, once it clicks in your mind, you'll get it. The whole overthrowing of the secret societies and as they were, you know, what was going on in Al Morocco before the colonizers got there, it was fully robust. Why most of the areas now are reserves in the United States, as they call it, which is a corporation that has taken hold and ownership of Al Morocco. And those that actually know about all this, how it allows an intercessor to come in. And we can't finish this without this, because this is the solution. I do have an appointment right after this. I'm going to be jumping off, but this is it. Okay, this is the last one I got for you, and this will answer a lot of the questions. Let me turn on my camera here. Okay, so now that you know the code is that they shroud all the light in darkness. They basically take your parents and all your ancient knowledge and they make a boogeyman. They put a boogeyman on it. And then when they put a boogeyman on it, because you're so scared of the boogeyman, you basically believe you either need to worship the boogeyman, which is not stomachable, or you just are going to be afraid of them and never accept the truth. So let me show you the truth about Halloween, because I've worked to crack this for years and I just got it from the ancestors. And so I would love to share it. I'm always also in a position that if I said something in the past and I find a higher truth, I'm going with the higher truth every time. I'm not going to be sitting there looking at you like I know everything and I knew everything already, or I wouldn't be here looking at you then. That's obviously obvious. Common sense ain't common, but here it is. The other day, after I finished a deep meditation, an ancestor came to me and said, Seven, what does hollow mean? I said, as in Hallow? Say, yes. I said, well, I remember that reference in the Bible, hallow be thy name, but I don't actually know what that meant. So I actually Googled it. Google comes back with the interpretation of hollow meaning to make holy or sacred, to sanctify or to consecrate, to venerate, to venerate. Remember that word, to venerate, okay? So obviously the next thing that would come to mind is Halloween, right? But at the end of the day, or at the beginning, I would think of Halloween and I would think, are we venerating ghosts, demons, goblins, devils, vampires, and vampire chicks with pink horns, all this kind of stuff, right? That's what we're venerating, right? Or is that what that holiday is supposed to be for? So we find that when we use our code, our cipher, that they're shrouding all of the real truth in darkness. We find that there's a day called Dia de los Muertos, known as the Day of the Dead, right? Because that's where it originally came from. But here I have underlined for you, prior to Spanish colonialization in the 16th century, the celebration took place at the beginning of summer. Okay, so right away, we know that Halloween should not start on October 31st. It should start 3 days ago, okay? Now, also, that's the beginning of summer, okay? Now, also, we got another situation here because apparently this is basically saying in a nutshell, and I just got to make this quick as possible. What this is saying in a nutshell is that this was about the ancestors visiting the earth to see you. It wasn't a time for you to venerate the dead. The dead were happy because they were actually where everybody is. They were with the whole cosmic family, not behind the scenes in the divide, behind the curtain of Dr. Oz, right? They were here in the space when they let go of the body and go into the spiritual realm. So it wasn't the spirits that were in prison and need to be venerated. It was actually the humans that were still imprisoned on earth, which was basically saying they are still in the dirt and they can't actually get out. So there's a certain time that we visit them, and that's at the beginning of summer. And when we come for 4 months, now that they know, they shortened that to 2 days. For 4 months, we would keep bringing you. And this is why it never makes sense to have altars to you as a little child. You would see all this stuff stacked up on the altar and you'd be like, Mommy, but spirits don't eat. So why the hell are we bringing food to them? Because this is this is the tradition turned upside down. This food was for us. Everything that was on the altar table were things the ancestors would bring to us. Just like if somebody visits you in prison, they'll bring things that you like. They'll bring things that help you remember who you are, your gifts, to try to keep you encouraged to also not only do your time and get the hell out of here, but not to incur more problems in your sentence because you would be looking forward to leaving. So if you inherit some of this hatred and some of this stupidity that you see going on, it's just going to only prolong the time that you're here, that you need to be here to figure out that all is self, okay? And maybe there won't be some sevens around trying to explain that to you so proficiently next time, because it's all like roulette. It's a roll of the dice to what body you get in next. So do the right thing now, or the balance thing, as I say. So this food is a symbolic for what should go to the person. Now, visitation is a cosmic right. There's a cosmic court. There's a cosmic constitution, and that is still upheld by the Moorish kingdom or the Saturnalian kingdom, meaning that there's judges, there's lawyers, there's all of that you see in this lower world, but exist on the cosmic level. And the only reason why it can't intercede on your behalf, the only reason why 4 months of your visiting days can get decreased to 2 or 3 is because you're not standing in line for yourself and actually saying you're not a color anymore, that you're actually someone that belongs to the portal, your mother, etc. Right? So I hope I got that through very clearly. But visitation is a cosmic right. Visitation, even in prison, a person's in prison, which means Saturn or bars, jail, all that law, the bar exam, all that is a reference to Saturnalian kingdom, doing time. Okay, so it is your right to have visitation. So what's supposed to happen here 3 days ago is your ancestors start visiting you. Now, if you think that your ancestors are dark, demonic, evil creatures in your subconscious mind, guess what? We're going to war. And that's going to happen now. Externally, I'm not sure if it can be stopped, but within 2 weeks, Israel is probably going to make a move because that's what this is all about. They're even saying this. They're even prophesying this themselves. They may go to war with Iran. And this is basically Jupiter and Saturn added on the as below distorted level, okay? So, and there's conjuncts and things happening around that time that align those two planets. This is why astronomy or astrology will show you everything, that there is nothing indeed new under the sun, but it'll also allow you to learn how to profit from the things that are actually happen, mainly by not getting your fields churned up and everything destroyed because you weren't in the right time or in the right place. So the reality here is that we have now to observe in this period, as I said, our ancestors as they truly are, not as, you know, as function-dating components that brought life, bring happiness, bring joy. This time specifically that we're in all the way up to November 1st is supposed to be the time that we keep getting more of our abilities, more of our gifts, so that we can break ground, like actually poke out of the earth and actually begin to grow. Many of us are already grown, but our branches must be, as our branches are wide, our roots must be deep. And so we have to know what's down there, because that's what's happening to most of the people that have been birthed under the fifth sun, which is the recent cycle that we just left. They have a hell of a crown chakra, but oh boy, as heavy as the head that wears the crown. They have no roots, meaning that they just fall over. The moment that they get all this power and this awareness, they go extraterrestrial. Everything becomes outside of them, extraterrestrial. Everything that is not about Earth and what is happening here, but what's going on out there. And they're guessing. And they're bad guessers generally because they don't have an eye. And if they have an eye, it's cloudy because they use distorted judgments of what they learned about the ancestors to determine what should be happening next. So this is something today that you get a chance to put the brakes on. You get a chance to now turn your own wheel and actually get into the fortune for sure, because their gig is up. And once you realize this, you'll start looking at stuff that you've seen all around you that's supposedly like the boogeyman, as I said, and find such a deep connection with how that relates to your history and her story, then it'll all click for you. And that is power. So this is not about throwing lightning from the hands like a Sith Lord. This is about you coming into total awareness of who you truly are, that all is self. So that's what I have to deliver today. I'm glad that we got a chance to broadcast that clearly. Judith, you've been amazing, you know, holding the space. Like I said, coming back in, you could see it took actually 2 weeks to refine that. I was there with it. And then, you know, I was like, I lost it. It was hard to grasp. I was like, so it's a lot to get your hands around. But, you know, this is all about the connection that we share together, because when we share this space, it's all of us, the people who are going to see this in the future, because there's no such thing as time. The people who are going to benefit from this, all those people are here in this space now. And so this is something that is needed and wanted, I guess, as long as it got recorded, because I sure don't have a recording on my end.
It is recording. Everything is okay. So we certainly should pick this up.
Yes.
For a part 3, but as for now, I'll let you go. I know you have another appointment.
Yeah, that one right there can even ride by itself. I mean, it's send that to me when you get done. Yeah. and I'll send it to my private group, but let me know when you're ready to upload, and then I'll upload everything and get the links in, or just send me where your links are, so that way when I finally upload it, I can get you in there, get some subscriptions to the channel. I will tell everybody that does listen to the recording today that they can check us out at Secret Energy. We're doing some major things there. We got some massive meditations that are actually happening within our ambassador training group. So the mentorship is there and the healing is there. Like if you got something going on with your mind, body, soul, and your structure, and you need another look at the whole thing from a metaphysical aspect, I think it's very rare to get a balanced, full spectrum view into yourself these days. So we're making sure we keep that portal open because it's important. So that's my love to everyone here. You know, this is my way of mending the heart of what's happened here in our experience on Earth. And I trust that we'll all come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, Sevan Boma.
All right.
Take good care of yourself. Bye-bye.
I will. I'll speak soon.